Hi, everybody. Welcome to Northpointe Plus, our podcast that just kind of reviews our message. With me, I have Doug Rutledge, a guest speaker.
You sounded so exciting, really.
It is. It is exciting.
I think we'd be way over that.
Hey, these people hear me talk to Rick all the time, okay? They're excited for you, too, I bet.
She didn't mean that, Rick.
I'm allowed to mess with Rick, okay?
Right.
I'm not on staff anymore, so I can, say those things.
Yeah.
But it is really good to have you here. Your big life project, Crossroads Farms. Can you just give a little recap just about what you guys do? I know we talk about it all the time, but I think it's good just as a refresher.
So we're 25 years old, and 25 years ago, God called us to a rural community. We consider those rural remote. So what that means is they are underpopulated, under-resourced. I mean, it's surprisingly, sometimes they're vacation spots because the people who live there leave, and they're under-resourced. So we minister in those communities to teenagers. We work in a cooperative, outsourced rural youth ministry way. So we come in, we build a youth ministry, and the churches rally around that together. So we have 3 existing and operational sites, 2 here in Michigan, 1 in Kalkaska. It's a bowling alley. Yep.
That's fun.
And they are finishing their building project. They'll have what they have in about a month here.
Okay.
They're done. And then the mine, which is in the Appalachians, it's in a place called Cadiz, Ohio. The mothership, which is in Reading, Michigan, Hillsdale County. And then we are training leadership for Montana, for Rosebud County, Montana. Unfortunately, we're 1 leader short, so we're praying into that God will provide the leadership. And then it looks likely that the 5th will be Waupaca, Wisconsin. And then when we're done with that may be it for me. I may have retired and they'll move me to, I say they'll just have to buy me a golf cart and I'll do the Christmas lights. I'll just drive around and people will entertain me by listening to my stories.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, so what does your day-to-day look like, I guess?
Wow.
And you can give the short version. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So I'm technically president, CEO. So I am still primarily working on making sure that the model is replicatable. So we streamline that. We write a lot. And that's what I do. It's also a lot of, this is a horrible name, but PR. So it's so that people understand they can be a part of this ministry.
Yeah.
And then to develop the strategies and the vision for the future. So we're operating on what's called a line, and there are 13 communities on what we call the Crossroads Farm line. Kind of imagine a train track going through the upper Midwest and West. So it starts as far east as Pennsylvania, and then it moves down into Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana. And that's what we're doing. So 13 different sites we're building,
cool.
Getting ready for that.
Yeah.
So I write a lot, I speak a lot, I travel a lot. This is a 10-bed month. So in 10 different beds.
That's such a funny thing to say.
It's not the worst it's been. I mean, and I'm thankful for beds, so it's not horrible, right? I'm thankful, right?
You're very thankful.
Thankful for beds. But
oh, man. That's so cool. And I guess something that I've always thought about is when they're rural communities, is it still like a little town where everybody still lives close, or is it kind of spread out? Like, so are kids having to drive in to get to you? Like, is it far, or are they all central?
It's a great question. So it depends on the community.
Okay.
Got a friend who says when you've been to one rural community, you've been to one rural community.
Okay, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So some are very centric. There's a town that pops up in the middle of nowhere, and it's surrounded by a township usually. And there are areas where there are consolidated schools in the middle of that community.
Okay.
Sometimes there are 7, 8, 10 school districts of small schools in the area, and it just depends where you are.
Okay.
So in Hillsdale County, we have multiple school systems, and there are towns that pop up surrounded by townships. That's pretty much a standard.
Okay.
You go, I like to say probably 8 miles between towns is the way it is. And, people live between, but the most of the population lives in a town.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I'm sure people probably have more questions, but hey, you can always send them in and we'll
Yeah, and
send
you
them
can
on
come down and see it.
Yeah. And so actually just to jump into our message from today, we just finished a series, like Battleground State of Mind, and it was all about the armor of God.
Right.
And then this is a standalone, and you spoke the greatest command.
Right.
So do you just want to give like a little recap of everything that you talked about today?
Yeah. So Jesus is confronted with a teacher of the law, and I love this. It's not one of those guys who's trying to trick him into an answer. It's a legitimate question. What's the greatest command? He's religious, he's spiritual, but he's interested in knowing what this teacher believes is the greatest. That establishes Jesus as something more than just another, itinerant preacher. He's really interested. And so Jesus says, you know this. I mean, and they do. They know the Shema. So love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. The second is like unto it. That's a really interesting phrase. In other words, they're contingent. I don't love God without loving my neighbor. And the truth is, if God is the source of love, and he is, 1 John, right? If God's the source of love, I don't love my neighbor well, and I don't love God without his love dwelling in me. So we really talked about that. And then I jumped off that because the question is, how do I love my neighbor? Christmas cookies, what do I have to do? And the answer really is found in a passage in Luke 8 where Jesus says to his disciples, let's go across to the other side. And I contend that we're not loving if we're not moving. If I'm not actively getting in the boat with Jesus, there were a lot of facets to this message, but if I'm not getting in the boat with Jesus, then I'm not going to the other side. I'm staying where I am. And so they got in the boat, and there was a storm, which is kind of how this wrapped up. Jesus gets them in a boat for one demoniac. Some scriptural accounts say there were two. We're not sure, only one speaks. But he crosses this lake for one. But on the way to doing what Jesus says, they hit a storm, and they're sure they're going to lose it. And my message really was as much about getting in the boat with Christ in spite of the fact that we know we're sailing into storms. I love that I can love my neighbor at a sacrifice just by getting in the boat. The first step is the hardest step. The first decision to do something actively is the hardest step. And then the second step is a little easier until it becomes a lifestyle where I'm loving my neighbor sacrificially. And that's the hard part, right? Especially in a contentious country. And we are in one right now. The world is contentious. You can't get anybody to agree on anything. And so how are we as Christians different in the fact that we're all going through storms? Nobody feels confident or comfortable with any of these situations.
Yeah.
So where does a Christian step into that?
Yeah.
That's my quick summary.
Yeah, I really like how we kind of spoke on this, and you even made a joke too, where you're like, we just talked about the armor of God, which some people, you get fired up, like, let's go. And actually, in some of the podcasts, I said that where I'm like, it gets you, which like can be a good thing because you're getting fired up and you're like, I'm ready to like serve the Lord and this is whatever. And Larry Carter spoke about resting first and sitting, because you can't go into battle without knowing your enemy, without knowing your weapon. Like you can't just go full steam ahead. And I do think that this goes so well hand in hand, because you also have to bring love to people that maybe it's hard to love sometimes because they actively don't like you.
Right.
Because it's not literally just your neighbor. Sometimes it is, but it's just it's your fellow man. It's the people that sometimes you don't agree with. And that's the crossing over. Too. And you know, how many times people are like in the Bible, wow, Jesus is hanging out with these, he shouldn't be hanging out with them. It's like, that is what we're supposed to be.
And the thing is, he's not just hanging out. He's really loving them.
Oh yeah.
Like, he really cares. This isn't some kind of political agenda. He's not trying to win their vote.
Not like showing up, hi, hello, then leaving.
This is him investing in their lives. And that's powerful. I mean, this trip across for one guy who's really not even aware that he's the problem, right? So, I say the only thing the disciples did in this story was get in the boat, complain about the weather, and then, freak out over the, naked crazy guy, right? That's it.
Yes. And how crazy too, like it's so funny when I find myself like reading the Bible, and so many times we put the disciples like, they're so great. I mean, they were best friends with Jesus. Like they're so awesome. And it's like, no, they were people and they they are with Jesus and they're still like, what do we do? Like I don't know what's going on.
And I'm one of those friends. Like I'm one of those who's saying, what do we do?
Yeah.
And I think that's the storms are there. They thought they were dying, which Jesus says, where is your faith? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm in the boat with you. Yeah. Haven't I told you some things that would give you a clue?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think I'm going to do? Abandon you in the middle of the sea?
Yeah.
And he doesn't, and they're afraid of it.
I was going to say something that I really like something that you said was like kind of the main part of the message is like what is on the other side.
Yeah.
Can you think of like some like, I don't know, application examples of like how you would tell Christians to go like, hey, this is, your calling? Because I've talked about before too, sometimes for me, I know the Holy Spirit's telling me to do something when I'm arguing in my head.
Oh yeah.
When I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should do that.
Yeah, because we don't think it's safe. I mean, our primary value here in America is safety. So last week I met a group of young musicians. This is a great example, and they worry me. Just as a dad and and I'm like, I don't know, that sounds horrible. I don't think you should do that. But I can't give that advice. So what they do is they tour and they perform as a Christian band. And all of the money and proceeds that they raise from that goes to support their ministry. I don't know how much I can talk about their ministry because a lot of it's clandestine. It's dangerous work. So if you want to check out the band, I can tell you about the band. They're they're called Trampoline. They're the Trampolines. They're really fun.
That's cool.
But their life is not about music and partying. Their life is about using the gifts and abilities God's given them to cross over literally to the people we hate the most, to go into the most dangerous communities on the planet and to do the most dangerous jobs in the world. And man, when I hear that, I think, I don't think that's who I am. I don't think I'm that person. And it humbles me. We like to pray into other ministry success, but frankly, I'm protecting my own comfort half the time. And so we say, well, God hasn't really called me to do that, or, that's not my call. But I'm telling you, get to know who those people are. Every rural community we travel to, we're aware of the unique challenges in that rural community. Now, that's not for everybody to come alongside and be a rural missionary, but I'm going to tell you that what we've discovered in Christian colleges is that by and large, youth ministry is dying. Ministry positions are dying because people don't want to do that. And I keep on praying, Lord, send somebody who has the desire to invest their entire life in this field, in this one place, whether they're noticed or not. Because frankly, the coolest people are all missionaries on some foreign field doing something really ridiculous and cool. And, we're afraid of that. We're like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, so sometimes it is, loving those people where you're putting yourself in dangerous situations, and sometimes, like I said before, sometimes it is just your neighbor, like that maybe you can't get along with, or I don't know what, but
that's the scariest walk because I have to do it over and over again.
Yep.
Like, across the world. I can't afford that.
Yeah. So just, right down the road or whatever.
Right.
And that's something else that you said that I really liked, is that love is a verb. And I think I've heard other people say that, but
DC Talk did a song.
Yeah. But hey, I think that is forgotten. Like we say that love is so important and that you got to love your neighbor. And it's like, okay, but I think we say that, hear that, and we're not talking about the how. Like, okay, so how do I do that? And how can I do that in my life? So I think that's really important for people to be thinking about, is like, what does that look like for me? Like, and because sometimes it's probably something you don't want to do.
Right.
And it's not something that you're looking forward to, or like, oh God, are you sure? Is that for me? Like, is that really what you want from me?
The world almost always responds to kindness. so even if they're radically opposed to the message you're bringing, kindness softens that. And again, in the mine, we've done this everywhere. There's a church locally here in the Lansing area who has a shoe connection. That's all I'll tell you. They just have a shoe connection. So we distribute shoes. Like that's one of the things we get to do. It's a riot because, if people come into some of our communities, they'd say, these kids are wearing more expensive shoes than I can wear. But it is an amazing thing. So one of the schools was very reticent about our ministry being involved at all. There's this whole concept of separation of church and state, and I can talk about that forever. But the ministry came in and said, we just want to give away 200 pair of shoes. So where can we set up and do it? And that the school was doing. They're like, nobody does that. What's your secret agenda? You're not going to hand out bad tracts, are you? And but they handed out the shoes, and the administration responded, even though they're not a believing administration. They loved it because their kids need shoes. They can't provide for those shoes. The church has provided across several different lines to do it. And I think the power of the local church is incredible. I say this all the time, so I'm going off task.
That's okay.
I'll just tell you. So I've got a good friend who says we always overestimate what we can do in a year. So everybody thinks, let's do it fast. Let's make the quick hit. And he says we always underestimate what we can accomplish in 5. I just believe that we're in a day and an age where the church still has gifted the American church resource. And within 5 years, they can radically alter communities for the cause of Jesus Christ. That's a powerful statement. That's not just, we're not just throwing dimes at a problem. What we're doing is we're attacking a position that Satan has insulated. And we can do that by crossing over. Yeah.
I agree with you that I think the church can do such cool things when they really focus on, just like, hey, like Jake Howard has said it before, and we talked about it during our last series, where it's like, don't just like read the Bible to get through it, but like study it and like focus on that. And I think that kind of can go hand in hand with like, let's not just hurry, let's see what we can get done. Let's really like focus and mentor and, all of that. And I think, if we want to be more like Jesus, we have to spend more time in the Word, and having a lot of what we talked about during our last series was having Scripture written on our hearts. Yeah. And so I just think that knowing His voice and then, really putting in the work to spend time with Him, so what He's calling you to do, knowing who He's saying, go talk to this person, or like send the text, even though you might think that it's weird. And I think you talked about that in your message too, about being different, so people who are around you know that you're different.
Right.
And you work with you guys work with kids. How hard is that conversation about talking about being different and possibly maybe looking weird, but doing it for Jesus because that's truly what you believe? Because I just remember being in youth ministries being like, I have to look like a fool for Jesus. Like, that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, especially for kids, middle school, high school, who are still figuring out like who they are. Yeah,
because they want their friends to embrace Jesus on a popularity level, because that helps me. Like, it's kind of selfish, right? And we do it as adults all the time.
Yep.
I don't want to say something that's going to hurt your feelings, so I avoid that. And I think kids in rural America, by the way, there's this misnomer that, it's religious in rural America. It's not. It's less religious. And so for our students, that's the trick. The trick is really to say, look, Jesus is demanding your everything. And if you don't give Him that, you have a hobby.
And
the hobby doesn't work out. The hobby will never give you what you think it will. So for us, we're called to serve Jesus in death. Well, that's harder to say when I'm 16 than when I'm 64. It's harder.
Yep. And a lot of kids too, hopefully haven't had to, go through, we just talked about, the day of evil that comes.
Yeah.
And I think that might be hard for them too, to like, well, that stuff never happens to me. Some kids, I know some kids do, like I am a foster parent too. So I know, unfortunately, that some kids do have a big trauma level in their life. But it's, it's a little bit, maybe you don't understand the full scope of it when you're younger, but then when you get a little bit older, you're like, oh no, like it's hard. Like and Jesus never said it was going to be like easy peasy. Like
he never said it was going to be popular.
Right.
He never said it was going to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So because we have a privilege, and it is a privilege to live in a country where we can speak Jesus' name without any kind of true opposition, right? It gets easy to get used to the comfort, and then you start idolizing the comfort. So we protect people from hearing the truth. Penn Jillette said this, so Penn and Teller, Penn Jillette said, how much would you have to hate me? He's an atheist. He's an avowed atheist. And he said, but if you're a believer and you don't tell me about Jesus and heaven, how much do you have to hate me to not tell me that? Mm-hmm. It's a powerful statement. He said, I want to have the conversation. I think I've got a better argument, but I want to have the conversation because you would have to really hate me a lot to want me to end up in hell. And I just think we need to get hold of the concept that Christians need to mobilize, but it's not in being right. Mm-hmm. It's not we're not about proving our point, which is what's so hard about this election. It's been opposing viewpoints coming at each other, using the same angry arguments that we've used forever. Mm-hmm. And they say, see, we're right. Nobody cares if you're right. Nobody cares. Mm-hmm. We care if you care. And that makes me sound like, bleeding hearts liberal almost, It makes me sound like I don't believe that there are rights and wrongs. I absolutely do. Mm-hmm. But as a believer, I'm responsible to live out the love of Christ today the way I live it. And I don't do very well with that.
Yeah, and I think that's really hard too, because just now in today's age, so many people are calling to be kind. People always say it, but then when it comes down to it, it's like, no, it even means to the people who think differently than you, and the people who act differently than you, and maybe like the things that you don't agree with, like you still need to be kind to them. Right. And I think that, and especially just around election time, and what you said, like it's selfish. Like we're comfortable because we in America, we get to like do whatever we want pretty much. Right. And not a lot of sacrifice going on. And so then when it comes down to it, we have this ability to argue, and it's like you're choosing the wrong thing to be comfortable with. We're comfortable with arguing and being hateful, but not being comfortable being nice and caring about others. It's just odd,
Yeah, I mean, Jesus was pretty clear. He said, hey, if they hit you on one side, turn your cheek. Okay. Have we forgotten the radical message of Christ? Mm-hmm. And that I can say that on both sides of a political aisle.
Oh, yeah.
And I should. And by the way, there are some politicians who do. Mm-hmm. They're loving Jesus together in spite of grave political differences. All right. Mm-hmm. It's cool. I have a responsibility to love the people around me.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that you talked about that I really liked was just about, the boat in the storm. Kind of, we circled back. We talked a little bit about it earlier, just that it wasn't going to be easy. The storm, he knew it was going to happen. He was with us, having him be with us. You said that like stress, difficulty, and turmoil turned me into myself.
Yeah.
I thought that was so good, because I know for me anyway, when I get stressed, I can get a little snippy. With my poor husband, with my family, like I can get a little snippy when I'm stressed. Something I'm working on, but still, I just, because we're supposed to turn away from ourselves. Ourselves are supposed to die. I'm supposed to be living for Christ. So I really appreciated you putting it in that way.
Well, so the wild part of that is that if life is truly a storm, and it is, when what's my threshold, I guess? Mm-hmm. Like anybody can take 3 seconds of rain, it's refreshing. 10 seconds of, downpour, that's a little different. 45 minutes of torrential downpour and wind, or let's talk about hurricane blasts that are going to go 24 hours. I think we all reach our threshold in the storm. And the objective is probably to get us to the threshold. Because I don't learn to be like Jesus in the calm.
Right.
Everybody,
or the comfortable too. Like
everybody looks like Jesus when everything's looking great. Everybody looks loving and comfortable. Rub somebody the wrong way and then see. And we're not supposed to do that deliberately. But, so stepping into that that knowledge that the storm's onset isn't the beginning of something, it is continuum.
Yeah.
And I have to become like Jesus, which means when I hit my threshold, I hope it's a little farther along. And sometimes it's not.
Well, and so much of just being a Christian and having like relationships with people is being honest about like our downfalls too. Like just talking with people being like, no, I mess up too. Like nothing about me coming and telling you this is saying that I'm perfect. I am in fact not perfect. I'm nothing. Jesus is the only. It's about him. Yes,
well,
he is the
point of the faith, right? He didn't come and die on the cross for people who are slightly marred.
Right.
Like he came and died on the cross for people who are completely and totally reprobate. That's it.
And I think that so many like Christians and people who are not believers forget that because we look up to these people that are in the Bible. Like right now I'm working my way through the Old Testament and it's just so funny because like we look at these people as like biblical superheroes. Like God used them in such a cool way. Oh my gosh. And it's like, but they messed up still. Like, right. and then sometimes they messed up for a long time. They're still trying to have a relationship with God and everything. Right. But it's like, oh, so they were just trying to. Like we forget that they're just humans and like they're just like us and we mess up and that is not the point. And Jesus doesn't say like, oh, I'm only going to love you if you're perfect or if you do all these things for me. No, that is not the point.
Yeah, none of this is perfect.
No.
So.
Oh gosh. Well,
he is.
I was going to say, do you have anything that you did not get to say in the message that you wanted to add?
Okay, here's the one last thing.
Yeah.
So in the middle of the storm, everybody's got opinions about what you should do. That's the teaching point I wish I could have shared. I just and it bugs us. Like it really bothers us. If they agree, it bothers me a little bit. If they disagree, it bothers me a lot. The bottom line, I had a conversation with two different guys. I'll say guys because they were guys. But about the same thing. And they gave me their opinion about how I can weather the storm. Not about how I get through the storm, but, what I needed to know. This is the information about the storm, right? So it's those wise voices. And they were opposed opposites. They were absolutely the farthest opposed perspective on the situation. I'm like, and that happens all the time. So somebody will tell you, you know what you should do all the time. I'm just thinking what the boat was like. They're yelling at each other. They're like, somebody better start rowing on the left side of the boat. And Peter, how about bailing a little bit? We're going down. Somebody wake Jesus up. That's when we yell at Jesus. We yell at Jesus when we realize everything we're doing is failing. He needs to pitch in. And Jesus actually is just saying, your opinions about what needs to happen here really will not affect the wind and the waves.
Oh my goodness.
It really will not affect it.
Yeah.
But I'm in the boat, and they know who's boss.
Yeah, because how crazy is him as a last resort? Like how odd. But when you get in those stressful situations, sometimes that happens where your eyes are not on him.
Yeah. But sometimes, only sometimes.
Right. Right.
I'm turning into myself. We're in a storm.
Yes.
I'm turning into myself.
Yes, I love that. So, and I guess too, what would you say to people who are Christians and so they want to give that piece of advice or, quick little, I forget what we even say, oh, you should pray about it. One of those things when you're in a really hard storm.
Really nice platitude.
Yes. What, what is something that you would want somebody to do for you when you're going through that?
just show they're in the boat. I mean, I really mean this. There's not much any of us can do about the storm. But if we're in this boat together, then I understand you're feeling everything I'm feeling. You know, we've come through a tumultuous 6 or 7 months here, just a million things. And I'll just tell you that for somebody to come along and say they're praying, if they really are praying, it matters more than they know. The second thing is to say, how can I help? That's a real question. And what they're asking is, how can I cross over? And don't expect a quick answer. Like in the middle of the storm, I'm not necessarily sure what you can do. I don't know what we can do to escape this. We're just weathering the storm.
I love how you said that too. Jesus isn't rushed.
No.
Like, because in today's day and age, just our type of people, we're rushed, we're hurried, we're hardworking, our eyes, everything. But it's like, he's not in a rush. And like, you're not, it doesn't matter how much or how hard you're praying for something.
Boy.
If it's not the time,
right?
It's not the time. But
yeah.
But thank you so much for having this conversation. I love hearing the little things, even though not everybody got to hear them and the message, but I love that they're here. So
the only people who see that are the techs who are like, what slide is he on? Where is he going? I don't know.
So sorry, tech people, but
he hasn't used these last 4. We're on that one already.
That's all right. That's all right. But yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for watching and sticking with us. And we will get to see you on Sunday.
Absolutely. Thanks. God bless you guys.